Hey, how's it going? If you enjoy Reddit story narration, please like and subscribe for more. /askreddit what's the scariest encounter you've had with a total stranger? Story 1. I was once driving in the country and it was pouring rain in the dead of night. So hard that I was driving very slowly and couldn't see any of the signs before GPS. I mean, I had never been in rain this heavy. I had to pull over to the side of the road to try and see the sign to see if I was going in the right direction. I didn't get out due to the rain, so was craning my neck forward to try and make out where I was when suddenly the passenger door opened and a man got inside the car, sat down and looked at me. Here is South Africa. There is a fair amount of violent crime and hijackings, so I instinctively started panicking and yelling and screaming at the top of my lungs, flailing my arms to try and do something, anything to stop this guy from attacking me. He started screaming as well in terror and jumped out the car. I quickly leant over and closed the passenger door and sped off down the road. I was breathing so heavily at this point and trying my best to calm down, nearly in tears. I kept replaying it in my head the whole time and suddenly remembered that the man smiled at me. It suddenly dawned on me that it was probably a hitchhiker that I hadn't seen who thought that I was pulling over to give him a lift, only to be greeted by me screaming and trying to hit him. Was probably his scariest encounter with a stranger as well. Story 2. I was traveling home to California and I was in Nevada. It was an emergency, so I packed and left at around midnight. It was about 5:30 a.m. or so in rural Nevada. I was at a stop on my usual route. I was very familiar with the particular stop and it was just an hour or so before the California border. Being a lone female, I concealed carry. I have my extended permit which allowed concealed through several states except California, and I was at my truck at an empty spot and I was in the cab disassembling and putting away my gun to be in compliance. Stepped out to go to the restroom and someone had managed to get close to my truck and was hiding along the passenger side, and I didn't know it until I'd walked past them. Whoever it was grabbed me from behind. I let out the loudest, most blood-curdling scream. Oscar-winning scream. But there was no other people at this stop. I fought and tried to buck the guy off of me, but I wasn't doing very well. Kicking lead him to lift me off the ground where I couldn't get him, and trying to break through his arms made him bend me over with him still behind me. I'm not sure how long I was screaming and fighting, but then I heard tires screech and I figured it was the creepy van my parents told me to avoid as a kid coming to take me away. Nope. It was a Toyota Corolla full of local teenagers headed to the gas station before school. The teens jumped out and ran towards us and the driver stayed in the vehicle. The guy who grabbed me took off. Two of the kids chased him through the desert beyond the gas station on foot, and the driver and the other kid made sure I was all right. I send these 4 boys Christmas and birthday cards every year. I'm sure if it wasn't for them I would have been kidnapped or killed. Josh, Austin, Mason, and James, thank you guys. Story 3. My story is not quite the same as most. Years ago I used to work as an ecological surveyor. Basically, I got paid to take long walks in the Peak District National Park here in the UK and note down all the plant species I saw. I was walking down a trail one morning along the edge of a woodland when suddenly about 8 of the bushes stood up and produced rifles. I nearly shit myself and they were laughing like hell. It was a bunch of British Army guys on a camouflage and concealment exercise, and they had been following me to practice. Apparently, I had nearly trodden on one of them earlier as he was hiding right by the trail. We all ended up sitting around talking about football for a bit. Nice bunch of guys, but very scary indeed. Story 4. When I was about 6, I was with my family at an incredibly crowded street festival we'd go to every year. I remember we had stopped to watch a band play for a minute or two, and then my mom, I assumed, took my hand and we continued walking. After a few seconds I realized the hand I was holding was puffy and hot, and my mom's hands were always cool and more slender, so I knew it wasn't her hand I was holding. I looked up to see a woman with long blonde hair and sunglasses grinning down at me. I said, "You're not my mom," and she just laughed and said, "That's okay, you can come with me anyway." Obviously, my mom and dad had realized I was not with them at this point and were freaking out. My dad just happened to look in the exact right direction at the right time and saw this lady leading me away through a break in the crowd. He ran over to us, grabbed her shoulder, and she dropped my hand and disappeared in the crowd. I still can't believe he spotted us. It was like shoulder-to-shoulder people at this thing. Story 5. It's a mix of the scariest and the best. I was 11 and at the park with my cousin who was 3. My cousin, being a stubborn 3-year-old, told me to leave him be, and I sat out on the bench. I was just reading my book and occasionally looking up until this 50-something-year-old man sat down next to me and just started talking. He asked me which kid was mine like 4 times even after I made it quite clear I was uncomfortable, and then he gets all close to me and was like, "Do you want another one?" So I started freaking out until this homeless man, who I later knew to be Marty, pulled me off the bench and told him that he was lucky he didn't pop his jaw and told me to go home. I'm glad Marty showed up because I don't know what I would have done. Story 6. I dropped my son off at school one morning and then went to the grocery store with my infant daughter. It was so early, there was only 1 or 2 other customers. There was an older man with a walker that I didn't really pay too much attention to that kept popping up in the same aisle as us. I got out to my car and put my groceries in and then was putting my daughter in her car seat when the man came up behind me. He asked me a question, and when I turned to answer, he shoved his walker into the back of my legs, pinning me against my car inside the open door. I tried moving around but couldn't go anywhere except forward, and he started pushing me down to the floor of my car. I was so scared that once he had me down there he was going to go for my daughter, so I threw myself over her so my whole upper body was in her car seat and wedged myself in tight, trying to cover as much of her as possible. He grabbed me by the hair and was trying to pull me up when someone started honking their car horn. Another mom had been sitting in her car with her own baby asleep and had seen what was happening. Another car pulled up behind mine and the man ran over and got in quickly, obviously never needing the walker. The police were called, but the plates on the car that he left in were stolen, so as far as I know he was never found. Story 7. I, 21F at the time, was in a store picking up some items for my house when I noticed a man was literally peeking at me from around a corner. I first brushed it off and continued my shopping, but was aware that this man was following me around the store. He then sang out to me and said I looked familiar and asked if I went to the local university. I didn't, so I said no. At this point I got creeped out, so I checked out and went to my car. I heard footsteps behind me and knew he had followed me, so I just jumped in my car and locked the doors. It was dark, so I hadn't noticed him go around the back of my car until he banged on my passenger window. I ignored him and started the car. This prompted him to run around the front and start banging on my driver's side door, trying to open it and asking me for a ride. I was terrified and just pulled out of the parking space as fast as I could and drove off, with him chasing my car until I rounded a corner. I have no idea what his plan was, but to this day I am nervous about dark parking lots at night. Story 8. While working a late shift at a restaurant at 16, I had a customer who just wouldn't leave. He was like 50 and just stared at me the entire time he ate his food, which was like 2 hours for some reason. When he came up to pay, he was super weird about it. Like I'd say, "Okay, here's your price," and he'd pause and say, "Do I get a discount?" or something, and I said, "No, will you be paying cash or card?" And he said like cash, and I was like, "Okay," and then he just stared at me while I waited for him to hand me his cash. After like 2 minutes of this weird interaction, he has his change, the bill, and he can leave. So I say, "Have a good night," and he says, "Can I go now?" And I say, "Yup." And he says something like, "Am I pestering you? Why don't I take you home and pester you there?" So I just thought nope and walked right back to the back room where I got my coworker to deal with him. Apparently she scolded him and said it was shameful he would say that to a minor, and he said, "Well then, can I take you home?" What a fucking creep. Story 9. When I was around 10 to 11, a friend invited me to a water park. During swimming at a wave pool, he found some random kid around our age and decided to tell this kid that the game we were going to play was hold me down in the water. I didn't get that memo, so I thought him and this kid were just trying to drown me. This went on for what felt like an hour of me swimming away and hiding. I didn't hang out with him afterward. Same trip. After we were done with the pool, I got to the changing rooms and there is a couple people in there. Old man on the bench asks me if I wanted him to help me change. I just said no thanks and quickly changed and ran out. Story 10. I was in Paris, in the train station that takes you to the airport. My flight was very early in the morning, so I planned to stay in the station until 5 a.m. or so and then go to the airport. This dude started talking to me very friendly. He praised my French and all that. He asked me where I was from, and I was totally lying because who the hell gives a stranger his information? He asked me if I'm going to the airport, and I said yes, tomorrow early in the morning. At some point, I realized another guy was kind of circling us. They were from the same ethnicity. For some reason, this gave me a bad vibe. I was kind of far away from the other people because I was using a machine to butt tickets and several of them were not working. I started walking towards the entry where more people was seated, and he's still trying to talk with me. The other guy is still following us, and then he says, "Do you know that the station closes in like 15 minutes, no?" I wasn't able to hide my surprise. He told me they didn't close before, but due to the amount of vagrants they do now. He tries to touch my arm and I asked, "What the fuck are you doing?" He said, "You don't want to spend the night here. It's a dangerous neighborhood and a pretty lady like you. One can only imagine what is going to happen to you." He offered to go to a hotel room with him. I was looking at the reflection of the glass wall and realized the other dude was getting closer to us, and fuck, at the moment I thought I was going to be abducted. I was nervous AF. Until I hear a Latin woman speaking Spanish. I looked at her and she was with her 2 adult children. I almost cry. She was Mexican and for some reason I was convinced she was going to help me. I said, "I don't think my mom is going to like that," and I walked towards her and said very fast hello in Spanish. "That guy and his friend are harassing me. Please help me." She did, and we stayed together the rest of the night until the train station opened again. I'm forever grateful to her and her family. They saved me. I was able to return home to my real mom thanks to her. Story 11. I was taking a shower in the bathroom of the walkout basement. My 3-year-old son was upstairs with my mother eating breakfast. I heard him open the door and told him, "Mommy is in the shower, you have to wait." The door didn't close, but he didn't respond either, so I asked him to go back upstairs and ask Grandma for whatever he needed. Instead, I see a shadow and outline of a hand touching the shower curtain and realize that there is an adult in the bathroom, not my son. I scream and punch through the shower curtain. I don't think I connected, but I heard the man run out anyway. As fast as I could, I jumped out and grabbed a towel to check on my son and mom. At the same time, my mom was coming downstairs to see if I was okay from the scream. The man never went upstairs and they didn't even know it had happened. The walkout basement door and window were open. I called the police and they didn't find him, just my empty wallet about a block away. They did come back to me a few weeks later to let me know that they caught a guy in the area raping women at gunpoint and they think it was the same guy. Never been so scared in my life. Story 12. I was about 19 and driving home from dinner one night, probably a ribeye sandwich from the local truck stop because those were cheap and excellent. A woman standing next to a motorcycle at the side of the road waved me down, so I stopped. She said that she'd run out of gas and that she didn't want to scare me, but her boyfriend was hiding down over the bank. Oh, this giant comes up over the bank in dusty road leathers. He's a damn mountain of denim, leather, and hair. Shit. Fake damsel in distress, I'm an idiot. I was so close to home I felt safe. Maybe I can leg it home. Surely he's too big to be fast? The giant apologizes for hiding, but we ran out of gas and there was no way anyone was going to stop on an empty road to help with me standing here. He's embarrassed. Now I felt a little guilty for agreeing with him. He's intimidating as hell without putting any effort into it. He doesn't have to. We're out of sight and isolated on a secondary road. But it's less than a mile to I-80. I can almost see my house from where I'm standing. It gets boring from there. I tell him I've got a can of gas for the lawnmower with at least a gallon left in it. He says he can go 70 miles on that. The truck stop is 2-3 miles up the interstate and is happy to pay for it. I'm home and back in 2 minutes. He insists on paying me $10 for a $2 gallon of gas because I'm not sure I'd have come back if I were you. There was just that 15 seconds of ice-cold, slow-motion terror between the girlfriend saying she didn't want to scare me. Who says that? And the mountain coming up over that bank and apologizing. Story 13. I was in high school and worked at a truck stop. One night a trucker came in and stared at me for a long time. Wherever I moved to, he was staring me down. I told him that if he needed anything that he would need to come to the counter and order it. He just grunted and kept staring. I'm not a small person, and at that time I was in football, wrestling, and track. I was also at the gym 6 days a week. I was 190 pounds of muscle and teenager hormones. But the vibes I was getting from this guy were making me nervous. I called up my other co-worker and told them I was going to be in the freezer for a while. So I was stocking the freezers and coolers for a while and then went to the bathroom. As I entered the bathroom, the trucker jumped up and walked in behind me and just stood in there while I took a piss and washed my hands. As soon as I got out, I grabbed the trash bags and beelined outside to take care of the trash at the pumps until he left. My co-worker asked me why the trucker kept following me after I finally came in. I had no idea why. He never said anything, didn't order anything, just filled up his semi and creeped on me. I've never been as creeped out by a person as I was with that guy. Story 14. I was at a storage depot with my ex, picking up some stuff or other. Suddenly and without warning, This oldish guy approaches out of nowhere and starts a conversation with my ex. I'm in the unit at the time, so it's possible he didn't know I was there. But the clipped tone and monosyllabic answers from my ex were enough for me to know he was making her feel uncomfortable. That's when I heard him say, "Don't worry. I'm not going to rape you or anything." Like, literally 2 or 3 sentences into a conversation with a total stranger. He felt this would be a reassurance. So I stepped out of the unit, making my presence known by moving some stuff around in the hall, and his whole demeanor changed. Somewhere between contrition and aggression that I dared insert myself into whatever the fuck he thought this was. My ex stayed back while I kept the old bastard's attention on me, and he took me to task for calling him mate, a common thing British people do when they don't know someone's name, saying it was rude and disrespectful to a stranger. I responded with, "As rude and disrespectful as talking about rape to a young woman you thought was alone?" He shuffled away, mumbling something about knowing the management, leaving us both a little shook. To this day, I have no idea what his damage was, but it was clear that he wasn't used to being confronted like that. God knows what he would have done if my ex had been alone. Story 15. I will never forget it. When Ghostbusters 2 came out, I wanted to see it. My mom took me to the local theater. I think I was around 9. I needed to use the bathroom, so I ran down the small hall and turned the corner. When I saw a much older man come out of the bathroom. When he saw me, he stopped, went back in. When I didn't move, he opened the door, peeking his head and arm out, motioning me to come towards him. I probably looked like a deer in headlights. I didn't move. It was frozen until he said, come on in." Panic rushed over me and I ran back towards my mom, who said I was pale white. She quickly left the theater with me and went home. Stranger danger worked out that day in the 80s. I can still picture him, or at least the picture my brain made of this memory. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more Reddit content.